Hello, and welcome to the A.D.H.Deep-Dive, the show that's not about ADHD, but is filled with proof it exists. My name is David J. Mund, and this podcast is not going to be a real-time podcast. There's a couple things we're going to talk about up front. Also, apologies for the groggy voice and the lazy lighting. I just woke up, and I remembered that I needed to shoot a header for this podcast, so I've got one light. I did not clean up the office. This is not a well-structured, well-organized, well-framed, well-lit cinematic podcast. This is just more about the audio here. I was recently featured on 107.9 CDY's morning program, which is a radio station up in northern Michigan in Cadillac, where I grew up. They're a top 40 radio station, but the day after Thanksgiving, they play Christmas music nonstop until either December 26th or maybe January 2nd, either the day after Christmas or the day after New Year. Main thing, I was featured in about a 40 to 45 minute interview portion of their morning show with Rich Spicer, my teacher back in my digital media production days. You're going to hear a lot of things that we have already talked about on this show. So, we talked about the show last week in Cadillac, which was my first hometown show in almost or over 10 years, around 10 years, which I gotta say went incredible. Jesse Ray and the Carolina Catfish, Once Upon a Bison, both put on an incredible show. It was an amazing experience that I was wildly anxious for all the reasons that we've already talked about on this podcast. If you're interested in hearing those reasons, go back to Turkey Daddies 2, the episode that I did with Alex DeSico. We talked about that a little bit. And then we also talked about the Neil Patrick Harris experience, the murder mystery type immersive experience that myself and Emma Sheridan wrote. If you're interested, you can listen to the episode Delicious Death, which we talked all about the Neil Patrick Harris experience. This is basically talking with somebody who had not yet learned that information. So we're doubling up on information you've already heard, but we're also kind of talking a little bit about what I was like as a student in school and what life has been like since leaving school. This was a catch-up experience for myself and Rich, but it was also cool to have kind of the tables turned a little bit in that, I've been doing a podcast for over 2 years now. This was an interview. So hear the vibes shift. Oh my goodness, this freaking focus will not lock. I'm having a great start to the morning this morning. But if you're listening to audio only, great, nothing is going to make any difference. If you're watching the visual component, which is available on Spotify and YouTube. Some people are telling me that they don't really watch the video version, but the video version is posted to Spotify. So I put a lot of effort into the video version, other than today, obviously. So, if you have the opportunity, watch the video. It's an additional component that I put a lot of work into, so please validate that experience. Also, one second, I'm going to have a sip of coffee. Anyway, we talk about the Neil Patrick Harris thing. We talk about the show in Cadillac. But as a quick little header... sorry. That visual component, this was posted to the actual radio. I'm going to go bald here. Hang on. I'm taking my hat off. What was I saying? Oh God, great job being a podcast host. It's early in the morning, okay? I have not done just about anything other than have my coffee and take the dogs on a quick little jaunt around the block. Right. This was posted to the radio, so there's no visual component. So if you're just listening, great. It won't make any difference. If you're watching, you're just going to see an image up on the screen of myself and Rich and then the 107.9 CDY logo. And then we'll come back to have a quick little recap. Basically, the way that it works is Rich and I would talk for a little bit, and then he'd pitch it out to the music, and then he'd come back. So you'll hear him occasionally say, like, that was Mariah Carey's All I Want for Christmas Is You. And then we'll talk blah, 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 blah. And then he'll pitch it to, up next, Jingle Bell Rock. And then it'll immediately cut to where we're at. So imagine you're listening in real time to Christmas music. As a quick thing, I am very interested to hear in the comments Spotify Wrapped just came out. And I'm also trying to give some reasons for people to comment here rather than just like assuming that they're going to comment. So I ask you as a header, please tell me your top 5 artists. Tell me your top 5 podcasts. It is no secret that my top artist was Blink-182. Then it was Childish Gambino. And then in a weird turn of maybe feeling like I should be embarrassed about this, but I'm not going to, the next 2 were Midwest Skies, the band I'm in, and To the Sea, my solo music, which I don't really talk about much on this podcast. Maybe I should dedicate an episode to talking about my solo excursions in music. I think that would be a pretty interesting episode, especially because I'm working on some more a little bit. And then after that was the Beatles. It's literally been Blink-182, Childish Gambino, and the Beatles for the last 5 years, however long Spotify Wrapped has been doing it. And then my top podcasts, I actually don't have them in front of me. Actually, I probably could look. I know that number 1, oh, there it is. Matt and Shane's Secret Podcast with Shane Gillis and Matt McCusker. Then we have Breaking Points with Crystal and Sagar, which is just a news show. War Mode. Then The Tim Dillon Show. Then Bill Burr's Monday Morning Podcast. So there you go. And then, of course, it gave you the like, what was September like for you? It said September was your mall goth, old school, emo, pop punk moment. So that's cool. Yeah, so I'm interested what your top 5 artists were, what your top 5 podcasts were, what your top songs were. Let me know in the comments. And if you think that it was rigged, which some people are apparently claiming it was rigged and weird, like the stats were not accurate, mine were dead on accurate, so I know that was the case. So let me know. Shit, man. And again, there's information that you're already going to have learned here. So if this is your second time hearing it, there's still actually some substantive stuff within this episode. And it's just a good conversation. It's very wholesome, in my opinion. So I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on it. And then another thing that I feel like I should be saying, I do not have exclusive content that I can give yet. I do have plans to make exclusive content in the future for the Patreon. I have a Patreon where you can become a member for as low as $1 a month. What that $1 gets you, you'll get a shout out, a thank you. Right now, that's all I can offer. I promise, have exclusive content in the future. Let me know what you want that exclusive content to be, what you feel like your dollar would get you, whether it's like a shout out at the end of the show or at the beginning of the show. Sorry, my dogs are whining. Hold on. What the hell is happening here? Is there somebody on my roof? Hold tight. There might be somebody on my roof. I don't know what the hell that was. And you also just saw me in my sweatpants. Proof that I just woke up. Judah, stop. Okay, my dogs are now whining because they heard whatever that sound was, and now it's going to drive me insane. So I'm going to cut to the radio interview, and then I'll see you on the other side. Anyway, yeah, the Patreon. Click the link in the description. Tap the link in the description. $1 a month. It gets you to become a member. You know, maybe we can build a little team, a little army here. And then you just let me know what you think that $1 would earn you or should earn you. Okay, so this is the 107.9 CDY interview with Rich Spicer, and I'll see you on the other side.
You know when you hear Mariah Carey? It's Christmas time. Or at least the Christmas format. 107.9 CDY Cadillac's Christmas tradition, that is Mariah Carey. Burr Lives just ahead. We're going to hear from Amy Grant last Friday here on the Get Up and Go Morning Show, which was our final one of the regular format in the Christmas season of 2024. I had a guest host. Rihanna Armstead was with me, a former DMP student, and now I have another former DMP student to co-host this morning for the first time, David Mund. How are you, buddy?
Can you believe it's the first time? I feel like I've known, over 10 years now?
So you were part of my first group. I think you
right.
graduated 2013.
That's right.
And I have a soft spot in my heart for all of that first group because I never knew if I was going to be any good in a classroom or not.
Sure.
And you were the group that taught me that do not have any preconceived notions about kids,
right? How
they look, what they do.
Correct.
Because you get them into a classroom and you set up the right situation for them and they will learn.
Sure.
But yes, it's been 11 years since, but we have stayed in touch over the years.
Absolutely.
And I've never known anyone who has more going on than you.
Wow.
Now, seriously, I have 3 jobs, but you've got a lot of things going on.
One could argue too many things going on.
So one of the reasons why we had you on this morning is because your band has a big show at the Venue Event Center in Cadillac on Wednesday.
Yep.
The big night before Thanksgiving.
The biggest bar night of the year.
And you are sharing the bill with a couple of other groups.
Yep. May I mention them real fast?
You absolutely.
Jesse Ray and the Carolina Catfish, also out of Grand Rapids, and Once Upon a Bison, a local Cadillac act.
And your group is Midwest Skies.
Midwest Skies.
We have so much to talk about this morning. We can't possibly cover it all in one break, so we have multiple breaks to do this.
Okay.
But we'll also talk about that. We'll talk about a recent, really, really interesting thing that you got to do in Massachusetts, and I want to find out how this country kid. Well, you're not a country kid, but this
northern boy.
This kid from Lake City, Michigan, ends up co-writing and co-creating a immersive mystery that stars Neil Patrick Harris.
You know it. A very surreal experience.
It had to have been. So we've got a lot to talk about here this morning, and we'll do that right now, Burl Lives. Dolly Parton and Rod Stewart and Baby It's Cold Outside, Cadillac's Christmas Tradition, 107.9 CDY. Rich with my co-host this morning, David Mund, one of the very first DMP students I ever had at the Wexford Misaki Career Technical Center. And David, you play in a band. Mm-hmm. You've played in a band for many, many years. Mm-hmm. You are a drummer by trade.
Yep.
And I've always thought that drummers in a band are the ones that have the most emotional crap in their head that they have to work out. So they
violently beating giant circles of brass.
That's how they get it out, right?
Yeah.
So, but you've been playing drums for how long?
I got my first, I guess to back it up, I was taught by Frank Youngman in Lake City. I started in 6th grade doing like the percussion thing. I got my first drum set in the 8th grade. And it's pretty much been since then. So I guess 2007, 2008.
And you are the drummer for Midwest Skies.
Midwest Skies. I also, humble brag, also do a little bit of singing in the band.
Okay. How did Midwest Skies come about?
It was started by James Johnson, Ryan Yikimoff, and Josh Jones, all Grand Rapids natives, about 15 years ago. A bunch of, I would say, Grand Rapids degenerates pursuing the pop punk world. And it has just continued in multiple forms. James Johnson still being the center there. He's been the through line through all of the different lineups. It is now myself, James Johnson, and Kyle Smith still pursuing the what I would call pop punk alt rock scene.
How long have you been with the group?
I joined it was either December of 21 or January of 22, right when I moved out to Grand Rapids. I was shooting a wedding with James Johnson, who also does the cinematography thing. And he had mentioned that a drummer had just left the band. And I was like, well, I happen to know a guy.
So did you have to audition, or was it, did you just play once and it was like, okay, you got it?
There was not a formal audition process. It was, well, if you want to come over and jam with us, we'd love to just play and just to stay creative, stay sharp. And I think that was their subtle way of auditioning me, and it was an immediate in sync. I don't know how to put it. We clicked very quickly. And like I said, no formal audition. I was not competing with anyone, at least to my knowledge. So yeah, like I said, January or so, jammed in his studio, and then from there I just played with them every week since then.
Harmony within a group is very, very important.
Yes.
If you aren't getting along,
correct,
that makes for lots of problems.
Tell me about it. Look, I am the first to say that while I would like to believe I've become a more humble individual, egos can get in the way, so it's very important, especially in a small group, to keep that stuff in check. You keep it at the door. And it has been a learning process, but we are as good and as in sync as we ever have been. And I really appreciate where we're at because we've kind of learned to put those egos aside.
We're going to talk more about the group and more about the show a little bit later on. And we're going to play one of the most famous instrumentals in the history of Christmas time. It's Leroy Anderson with Sleigh Ride, CDY. NSYNC's version of the first Noel from Cadillac's Christmas tradition, 107.9 CDY. Almost said best mix, but we'll bring that back on December 26th here on 107.9 CDY. So it's time for a little bit of This Is Your Life with David Mund. So David, as we have established, if you're just joining us, David is part of the group Midwest Skies, and he also has a fascinating story to tell later on this morning about something that he did out in Massachusetts, which we really want to get into. But I got to tell you, David, and I've told you this story before, but never on the air. I did on your podcast when you had me on your podcast, and we got to promote the podcast too.
Yeah,
There's
sure.
so much stuff to talk about.
Please.
But, David was the very first and still only person in 12 years
I knew it was coming.
in the classroom that I had to step in between.
That's right.
To prevent two people from throwing hands.
I'm not that guy, but I was that guy.
You were a temperamental kid
Yeah, a little
back
bit.
in high school.
Yeah, you could say that.
Yeah, you were.
Yeah.
You were. And I thought to myself, and it was like literally within the first 2 or 3 weeks of me getting in the classroom, is what it's going to be like in
What
digital media
have I
production?
done?
And fortunately, I have not had to step in and stop a potential fight since.
Yeah, I think that says a lot more about me.
Well, you've matured.
Sure.
Yeah. So, but that goes back to the pounding out aggression in the drums on the
Yeah.
drum set, right?
Yeah.
In addition, David was also one of the first people that I helped get a job at 9 and 10.
Wow,
And
yeah, absolutely.
and for a period of time, you were in operations, and then you moved over to photojournalism. What did you enjoy about being a phojo?
It was my first real experience, I guess, doing this kind of thing where my job was to get involved with the media. So, and by media, I mean like cameras and audio, and talking to people, asking them questions about their life. Because part of that job as a photojournalist is to go and cover the beats that a lot of the reporters do. But sometimes there's not a reporter there. So it's still my responsibility to get the story. So asking people questions about the story that whatever I've been put on for a beat to go cover. And again, checking that ego at the door, that like, this is not my way to promote myself. This is in service of some other grander project.
A story to tell.
Right. Yeah. And I think that definitely kickstarted a lot of my interest in being behind the camera, but also just storytelling in general.
Did that experience help you as a podcast host?
Probably indirectly. I don't think that I've necessarily drawn that line up into, and if I'm forced into a corner to think about it, probably.
I didn't mean to force you into a
No,
corner.
that's great. I should think about things critically like this. Yeah, almost definitely. I don't necessarily know that I can expand on it more than just, it taught me how to ask questions in service of telling a greater story while trying to let people authentically be themselves. I know, look, I know the story that needs to be told at the end of the day. I know the sound bites I'm looking for, but I can help people authentically get there rather than being, could you say this? Like directly, word for word?
In my experience, in all the years that I've, asked questions and done interviews and things like that, I always thought the most important thing was to listen.
Yeah.
Because sometimes an interview can go into a fascinating different area if you just pay attention to what the person you're talking to says.
Right.
Yeah.
And as a very guilty party in this, many people want to, but don't always have the opportunity to hear themselves talk. They don't get to talk uninterrupted often. And that's when you can learn the most about someone, is just by setting them up to, again, authentically be themselves, and then stepping back and let them do the legwork of explaining who they are, what they think, how they feel. And they just don't always get presented with the opportunity to do that. So
it's interesting because in our classroom, we're dealing with a bunch of 11th and 12th graders who in many cases have never heard themselves and what they sound like before, so that they're listening in the headphones and they're doing right now we're in the middle of doing the biography assignment, which you remember.
Love that.
And 98% of people cannot stand how they sound.
Sure.
And and did you ever deal with, I'm at the point where I'm numb to it because I've been doing it for 3/4 of my life, but
Look,
what about you?
I mean this in the most self-gentle way. I'm what you would consider a soft narcissist, right? So I actually do love to hear myself talk a little
there you
bit. But a part of that,
you're the 2%.
That's right. I'm the guy. But part of that, yeah, genuinely, is like there's insecurities to talking about yourself, right? Because you're trying. It's the same thing with storytelling. You're trying to pitch yourself to other people, and when you hear yourself explain that pitch for the first time, sometimes it's a bit of a humble pie, being like, I don't think I sound or didn't sound the way I thought I did, but it's part of that learning experience, right? Especially if you can't confidently talk about yourself, there's a little bit of projection in there that you have to figure out how to do in order to authentically represent yourself. And maybe I'm just rambling about nonsense here, but you know what? I'm just going to bring it back to you. No, I didn't have that issue.
Okay,
I don't think.
Very good. You know what? It's a perfect time for us to pause and check your forecast with local first meteorologist Morris Langworthy, and a whole lot more to get to with David Mund, my co-host here on the Get Up and Go Morning Show, 107.9 CDY. That's Amy Grant with Winter Wonderland, Cadillac's Christmas Tradition, 107.9 CDY, just after 7 with Rich. And David Mund, my co-host this morning. We are going to get to back-to-back instrumentals from David Foster and Mannheim Steamroller in just a few moments. But let's see, where are we going to go? So we had you here this morning mostly to talk about the show on Wednesday night, Midwest Skies. How did the band get its name? Obviously, it was before you came. You became.
Yeah, I would say that's something I'm less familiar with. It was probably just one of those, let's throw it at the wall and see what sticks. From the Midwest, everybody looks at the skies. I think it might have been as easy as that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds good to me. So tell us a little bit about the groups that are on the bill with you.
Jessie Ray and the Carolina Catfish, I would consider your rockabilly, folk stomp type music. But Once Upon a Bison, if I may kind of pitch about what I talked to you about earlier, voted Cadillac's #1 live music act. I'm definitely, unfortunately, not going to be able to remember off the top of my head everybody's name, but Alex DeSico, Charles Thompson, and many others. These are the two I'm just mostly familiar with. All Cadillac natives. They're a bit of a catch-all. Your rock and roll, your psych rock, your alt rock, your... what are genres even? What do genres mean anymore?
Genres mean nothing.
Yeah.
If the music is good, it's good.
Let's go with that. All three, and I am going to consider Midwest Guys included. I'm really proud of what we're doing. Great live acts, very entertaining watches. So I'm more hyped for that. You go in for an enjoyable experience. You're probably not going to know all of the music, even when it comes to some of the covers that the bands do, but it's a great show to watch. So I'm really excited about this bill for that reason.
Wednesday night, showtime is what?
Doors open at 6.
Okay.
Show starts at 7.
Okay.
45 minutes, hour 15. Those are the time slots for each of the bands. Once Upon a Bison is headlining. Midwest Skies is up first. Jessie Ray of the Carolina Catfish is filling it out in the middle. So 3 different succinct variations of the rock genre. So you kind of get a little bit of everything in the show.
Tell us a little bit about performing live. You get a rush from that?
Yeah, I think we could retouch on the "I'm a soft narcissist" thing.
Okay.
It is the greatest thrill of my life, to be honest. Yes, there's a part of look at me, I love to be praised and adored, but also like I never feel more creatively fulfilled than when somebody enjoys what I'm doing musically. I mean, what are we doing here? We're part of a radio show that plays music. You can have whatever leaning ideologically, you can be anywhere on that spectrum, but we all listen to music.
Music brings us together.
Right.
Music is high art.
Right.
And I have a couple of students who say they do not listen to music, and it's like,
whoa, that's a thing?
How can that's depressing.
I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, I mean, because it is the greatest art form that was ever invented, because it can take you to places that it can take you beyond happiness. It can take you beyond sadness.
Yeah.
It can do anything.
Well, and there are songs and genres for all emotions. I'm sure whoever is listening in this moment can think of your favorite song to listen to when you're sad, or your favorite song to listen to hype you up for the next big thing that you're on. Like, that is something that transcends time and space, right? And I think that's, to fit into that theme, that is why I feel so creatively fulfilled, is I had a good music teacher that helped me get to this point, but also it's a passion that I've chased, And if anything, I'm just proud of myself that I get to still do it, and that's why I do it.
And can we also say how important it is, and this is not to pat myself on the back
Please
or
do.
anything.
You deserve it.
How important is it to have an adult that sees you as the raw talent person that you are and encourages it?
I will say,
because I will tell you, musicians are budding musicians are out there. They're square pegs. They're not gonna fit into some certain area.
Sure.
But it takes a special kind of adult to see that in a kid and nurture it.
Yeah. Teachers like you, Cammie Cook, Frank Youngman, especially Frank in this music context. Frank actually recently commented on something that I posted saying that he was, proud of me, which is just words I actually love to hear. But I said, thank you for always, believing in me and teaching me to believe in myself. That is more important to me. Is like, I appreciate someone who believes in me, but like, it's really hard to convince someone who has like, self-view, self-image issues, but to constantly reassure that like, don't worry, kid, you'll get there. One day you'll learn that you are capable and competent and worth love and like,
enough.
You are enough. That is the biggest thing that you can say to a kid as a teacher, which I do want to give you your flowers. You were very much part of my life in that way. You were a teacher and an instructor that encouraged me and convinced me that I was enough.
Yeah.
I appreciate you for that.
Well, I appreciate you, bud. All right, more coming up with David Mund here on the Get Up and Go Morning Show, 107.9 CDY. It's David Bowie with Bing Crosby and Little Drummer Boy from Cadillac's Christmas Tradition, 107.9 CDY. David Mund, my co-host this morning, and David, Midwest Skies has played a lot of shows. How many annually? How many would you say you do in a 365-day span?
At a bare minimum, with some months being none, some months being a lot, at least 2 or 3 shows a month.
Okay.
Mostly around Michigan. But we recently, if you were heading me into that direction.
I was. Where did you go?
We recently played in Bowling Green, Ohio, which, to be clear, before I joined Midwest Skies, I was a fan of Midwest Skies. They played Warped Tour. They did some cross-country tours. And right after the pandemic is when I joined, so some of that touring experience had kind of slowed down. This trip that we made out to Bowling Green was part of a weekend tour that we were on, so a Friday, Saturday, Sunday show. And that was my first experience to be like, not to have the opportunity to play out of state, but to be enjoyed out of state. Like, because a lot of shows that you play, there's usually someone there that that you can rely on, even if this crowd hates me or wants nothing to do with me. There's that one person there who will authentically support me no matter what. But when you go out of state or you play to these markets that like there's nobody there that you're really relying on your actual ability to be a decent musician, to be enjoyed there. And that was my first opportunity to see a crowd of people really genuinely like our sound.
How did that gig out of state come about?
As with most things at this point, I would say social media. Somebody set us up with the venue, which was the Bridge in Bowling Green. We're also putting a lot of new music out right now, so the Spotify's, your Indie on the Move, like that type of like promotional stuff for bands online got us the gig.
It is interesting because 15, 20 years ago and beyond, you pretty much had to rely on word of mouth in order to generate crowds, or hope that somebody would put your song on the radio,
right?
Which was very hard to do. So, would you say it's an easier time now as a being in the band that you are to be able to get your music out and promote yourself?
To put the music out, it's never been easier. For people to consume music, that has never been an easier task to do. What I do still view as a challenge is like the phrase butts in seats, like getting people to come to a show with things being as expensive as they are right now. People are working more hours than they have in quite a long time. It's not, sometimes you just want to come home and sit and do nothing for the day. So getting people out to a show is the hardest part of being in a band. But now that we're at a point where, again, I think people actually enjoy us as a live act, like that is the thing I want to focus most of my attention on is, yes, we can make music all day long that might get buried into the Spotify ether. The algorithm might, cover it up. But like, there is nothing like going to a good live show, which again is probably the biggest challenge, but the one worth chasing the most.
Music is powerful, and we mentioned this earlier, but there's also something communal about live music, right? A concert,
right,
where everybody's in the groove and thinking the same thing and enjoying the band. And
again,
what would you consider the most powerful thing about a concert?
I think you're right, though, that shared experience is, no matter what's going on at home, no matter what's on your brain, somebody next to you has come to see this exact same live show. They know the words to this song, and you don't care what their leanings are. You don't care what their history is. For that moment, you are the same. And that shared sense of experience, yeah, the community aspect of watching live music, especially a band that everyone is there to see specifically, there is nothing like that.
And we all need that, because we are, in many ways, more divided as a society than we have ever been.
50-50 when last I checked.
And I don't want to get political about it, but we need to have something that pulls us together.
And music is the strongest way to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. All right, we're going to take a break. We're going to get your forecast here from meteorologist Morris Langworthy and spend a little more time here on the Get Up and Go Morning Show with my co-host, David Mund. Produced by Phil Spector, The Crystals and Santa Claus is Coming to Town, from Cadillac's Christmas Tradition, 107.9 CDY. David Mund is my co-host. David, for those of you who were not with us earlier this morning, a former DMP student, one of my first group, graduated in 2013, and he has done so many things with his life in the last 11 years. In fact, it seems to be like a new thing about every year. And I attribute that. David has always been, in my opinion, one of the most restless people I've ever seen.
Yeah, a little bit.
You are never satisfied to stay in one place for very long. You're always on to something new.
Sure.
And there's something to be said about that. You have, in my opinion, a lifetime of experience under your belt at a very young age already.
Sure.
One of those things is the host of a podcast called the A.D.H.Deep-Dive, which I was a guest on.
Yes,
I was honored to be asked about a year or so ago to be on that podcast. But what gave you the idea to start a podcast and the subject matter that you cover?
I think if I think back to a particular specific comment that you made at one point, was, look, I've always wanted to express myself, but sometimes it felt like I didn't have the opportunity to be heard. You think back to some of the like gatekeepers of media, right? There's your Hollywood, there's your networks, there's the whatever. You're waiting for other people to give you an opportunity to express yourself. A podcast felt like the best way for me to just be me every week. So the A.D.H.Deep-Dive, for what it's worth, the log line is the A.D.H.Deep-Dive, the show that's not about ADHD, but is filled with proof it exists. It is never necessarily about one particular thing, just like my career is never about one particular thing. What is it? Jack of all trades, master of none. We're going to talk about the spectrum of creativity and art and expression and love and loss and pain. We're going to be authentically ourselves and talk about the things that we are most passionate about, and that's what you're tuning into every week.
Personal favorite guests or favorite topic that you've covered?
Number
so far?
one, Rich Spicer.
No.
Number two,
no.
Frank Youngman.
You're just saying that.
No, okay, so here's the thing. I do really mean that the times I get to authentically be myself are the times I enjoy myself, or at times I enjoy the experience the most. So when I have former teachers on who knew all versions of me, the version of me that wanted to be seen, the version of me that is being seen, near and dear friends of mine that I don't often get the opportunity to talk to. So people who live out of state. So we kind of get to use that as a medium to catch up, clue each other in on like where we're at in our creative pursuits. It would be tough for me to say one particular individual is my favorite, but yeah, people who knew me, who still know me, who want to know me, rather than just using it as a means of promoting their thing, which is fine. We can promote your book or your album or your idea or your art. That's fine. But if we're just talking about what life has been like, that's when I have the most fun on the podcast.
Just conversations about life.
Yes.
It's really what it all is.
Correct.
Yeah. And I had a great time. It was very interesting having that turned around on me.
Yeah.
Because I am used to being the one that asks the questions, not being the one. Except there were a couple of times I actually turned it around on you.
You did.
I did.
It's like you're a professional in this medium.
Well, I've always said, David, if I'm 54 now, and if I were to start over again, I would get a counseling degree.
Oh, yeah?
I think counselors are needed very, very badly, and there are not enough of them today, because people, not just kids, but people are going through stuff, and they need someone to listen. They need someone to not solve their problems, but just say, I get it. I understand.
Sorry to interrupt you. Can I talk on that for just a second?
Yes.
In that, like, when people view or hear the word counselor, they sometimes think of a person who I pay to tell me how to fix my life. That's not what it is all the time. Maybe that's what it is sometimes, but that's not what it has to be. Exactly like what you just said. Sometimes you just need someone to listen to you and tell you you are enough, and that is okay. Providing a space for you to talk about your issues is a healing process.
I got a text from a former student just a couple of weeks ago who just needed to unload.
Yeah.
Was having a lot of life frustrations and just needed somebody to listen. And that is something, I think that's a lost art. I think listening is a lost art today.
Yeah.
So anyway, more with David Mund coming up on 107.9 CDY after Air Supply CDY. The Royal Guardsman with Snoopy's Christmas from Cadillac's Christmas Tradition, 107.9 CDY. So we've talked with my co-host David Mund about Midwest Skies, which we will wrap it up with as we get close to 10 o'clock, because that's the main reason why you were here. We've talked about the A.D.H.Deep-Dive. We are going to spend the next couple of breaks talking about this very fascinating thing that happened to you just last week.
Yeah.
Right? How does a kid from Lake City, Michigan, end up becoming so intimately involved in an immersive murder mystery with Neil Patrick Harris in Capital One?
Am I answering that question?
That sounds like almost too much of a question to answer.
Well,
like we might have to divide this into part 1 and part 2.
It starts by not burning bridges.
Yes.
Yep. Keeping in close contact with some of the most creative and talented people you know, and finding ways to collaborate with them.
And how did you meet those people?
I am dear friends with a woman named Emma Sheridan, who runs her own immersive company, Firefly Tapestry Storytelling, who, for what it's worth, maybe it's not necessarily worth it to get into exactly what immersive theater is, but essentially it's choose your own adventure theater that you are a part of as a guest, that you get to be involved in as a character.
You are not sitting in a chair in an audience. You are actually part of the production.
You are part of the story, and you are integral to the unfolding of the information as part of that experience.
And you co-wrote this.
Yeah, so sorry, I don't know if you had a follow-up there.
No. I'm just kind of wondering how. The questions are just bubbling.
I'll give you the short
pitch. Give me
pitch.
the Reader's Digest version.
Yes, maybe even the People Magazine version.
Okay, yeah, because
this was featured in People Magazine.
You did get coverage in People, yes.
Yeah, not to clout chase here, but yes, this was featured in People Magazine. So Emma Sheridan of Firefly Tapestry Storytelling was contracted by a man named Chris Waters of Constructed Adventures, who does your Amazing Race type gameplay mechanics for immersive theater. They both had a shared client who wanted them to write an immersive experience for them. Then through that medium got pitched this thing. I don't know how Chris got involved with this necessarily, but he cast Emma to write this experience, and then she brought me in as a co-writer to write and direct a 2-day immersive experience for Capital One card holders and executives, starring Neil Patrick Harris and his husband David Birdka, who is big in the murder mystery immersive theater space. Honestly, it truly is all about who you know. I mean, to first and foremost say that, I have imposter syndrome running deeply through my veins, so I could sell my experience short all day long, but it is in who you know and who you keep company with.
Absolutely. And I've said that in the classroom for years.
Absolutely.
You aren't going to find opportunities if you isolate yourself.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's just a big part of it, is being immersed in the creative space with good friends who trust my vision and value my input. and then continuing to build and strengthen those relationships and connections.
Did you have experience in writing anything and coming up with anything in this space before?
I have written more things that I could potentially count. Less than 0.5% of that has ever been turned into something. So your short films, your sketches, your productions.
How many times did you start something and not finish it?
Oh, gosh. Do we have all day?
So lots of projects
sit here.
just kind of fizzled out after. Yeah.
And as they do, you've got to
Which they
continue to create
Right.
so that when you strike when the iron is hot, when something is meant to be, and not to get necessarily too woo-woo or manifesty about it, but when something is meant to be, as long as you don't say no to those creative opportunities, it will become, right? And so with this particular immersive experience, it was literally just that I was asked to be a part of co-writing it, which we can talk about all the intricacies of what it was like while I was out there and whatever.
We're going to cover the intricacies in another break.
Yeah, that's totally fine. And just being asked to do it is how it came to be.
That is, I mean, what you posted this on Facebook a few days ago, and it was a pretty well-kept secret up until then.
Couple of NDAs.
But and I looked at that, and I knew I was going to have you on the show anyway to talk about something else, so we had to cover this. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the experience itself coming up on 107.9 CDY. Here's your forecast from Morris. Steve Lawrence and Edie Gourmet from Cadillac's Christmas Tradition, 107.9 CDY. Sarah McLaughlin with Bare Naked Ladies, and Roy Orbison, Pretty Paper, coming up. But first, we're going to continue our visit here with David Mund, who we have had so much to talk about. This is a 4-hour show, and I could literally sit down with you, and we could talk for hours about the things that you have done since high school. But would this be the proudest moment? This immersive murder mystery that you were involved with?
Unquestionably.
Okay.
Look, there is definitely a part of it that was like, oh, cool, a small town kid got to work with one of Hollywood's biggest actors. Great,
I know,
awesome.
But even that is kind of cool.
Right, absolutely.
Right?
At face value, it's cool.
Yeah.
Under the surface, it's even cooler.
Yeah. So tell us about the experience itself.
So it was, a 2-day immersive, consider it murder mystery adjacent theater experience. We wrote a story which I think maybe just for proprietary reasons isn't super important or necessary to get into about what the story was about, but we were tasked with co-writing and co-directing the performance portion of this immersive experience starring Neil Patrick Harris and David Birdka, who again is big into that murder mystery immersive theater world. It was out in Lenox, Massachusetts at a place called Canyon Ranch, which is just this resort out in Massachusetts. And think about, if you're not familiar with immersive experience, it's basically like you are at a particular location where characters interact with you and story unfolds around you, that you are integral to the unfolding of that story. So think of it as a choose your own adventure. If a character comes up and interacts with you and they ask you what you want to do, if you want to turn right, they're going to turn right with you and you're going to go down that particular path. You might learn a little bit of information about that character. You might get a reward about choosing the right path. But if you turn left, that's okay. We've got an option for that as well.
Okay.
Plenty of actors were a part of this, lots of them friends of Neil Patrick Harris, which, again, just as a little plug, one of my favorite people to meet that entire experience was of the magic duo Penn and Teller. Penn Jillette's wife, Emily Gillette, was one of our actors. She was amazing. I have a million things in the world to say about her. Listen, again, the biggest part of this was meeting the people that I got to meet. These connections that I made are the reason that I do what I do. You meet these people, you get opportunities to have future creative experiences. That was the most rewarding part of this. And just getting to play pretend for a weekend, honestly. Like,
Were you part of the cast, or were you the writer?
Yes and.
Okay.
Initially, I was not part of the cast, but we kind of weaved in a way that I could be, which touches on that I want to do everything thing. Yes. I got to act in this. You get to know my character throughout the weekend, and you start to think that maybe I might end up being the bad guy. And then right when there's an opportunity to maybe accuse me, you find me dead in front of everyone, which again is part of that story that isn't necessarily important to talk about. But
this unfolded over more than one day?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. You get there Friday night. Well, they got there Friday during the day. We run a little bit of a dress rehearsal. We do a table read with all the actors. And then Friday night, it kind of kicks off in this like a bonfire lore building experience. And then all of Saturday, it's the games portion that Chris of Constructed Adventures was what am I looking for? There's a word I'm looking for. He was the guy who set up the games part of that. And then Saturday night is this like live theater experience, which is what we had a bigger hand in writing, was that particular performance, which is about 90 minutes of theater that you're watching. So script, which again, talk about validation, hearing Neil Patrick Harris read some of the words that I wrote for him, ask me like if this is what we wanted him to do. Like, you're asking me? You're asking me?
And at some point there had to be that Lake City kid who looked at this situation and had to pinch yourself that you were part of this.
Again, the phrase imposter syndrome is a dominant theme in my life. But I think one of the biggest, most important world building parts for me was the second he walked in that door, viewing him as he is, as just a human being with his own wants and dreams and fears and ambitions, and him viewing me as a professional in this industry. Like, it was a very humanizing experience to see one of, again, I hate to use this clout chasing term, Hollywood's biggest names on kind of an equal playing field. That was really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, all I can say is when you posted that on Facebook, I was like, holy cats.
Yeah.
This is what an honor.
Yeah, it really was.
Yeah.
I if I could just, in 5 seconds here, again, Chris Waters of Constructed Adventures and Emma Sheridan of Firefly Tapestry Storytelling. I could not have been a part of this without their trust and creative collaboration. I am forever honored that they asked me to be a part of this experience.
If there is anything that you can get out of this conversation with David Mund, don't close yourself off.
Right.
Open yourself up to opportunities.
Yep.
Don't say no.
And to be a trope here, keep going. If it doesn't seem like anything is hitting right now, it will. If the only way to ensure that the creative things that you want to pursue won't happen is to stop chasing them.
Right.
So
fail means first attempt in learning, right?
That's right.
That's what it stands for. All right. So we've got one more visit with David, and we're going to go back to the show on Wednesday night, coming up on 107.9 CDY. That's Mariah Carey, and Santa Claus is coming to town. Cadillac's Christmas Tradition, 107.9 CDY, your Monday forecast from meteorologist Morris Langworthy coming up. But one more visit with David Mund before we say goodbye to David. Thank you for co-hosting the show this morning. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
You have a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff. You keep your life very, very busy. And as I mentioned before, as one of the most restless people that I have ever known to come through the digital media production program, restlessness isn't a bad thing.
Yeah.
Especially when you're making connections.
Yeah.
And so the main reason why we had you on the show was to talk about the pre-Thanksgiving show that Midwest Skies is doing with two other groups at the Venue Event Center in Cadillac on Wednesday night. So let's talk about that one more time.
Yeah, so doors are at 6. The show starts at 7. Midwest Skies, our group out of Grand Rapids, pop punk, alt rock, will open up the show. Then we're handing it over to Jesse Ray and the Carolina Catfish, another Grand Rapids, again, rockabilly, alt rock, folk rock type group. And then headlining is Once Upon a Bison, Cadillac's, as voted by the people of Cadillac, #1 live act, a handful of good friends of mine in there. This is my first time playing Cadillac in over 10 years, which is going to be a surreal...
That doesn't even seem possible.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. I'm only a little bit anxious for that particular thing.
Well, we want to fill the place up, so
yes,
you can you got fannies and seats, and you're not, or hopefully out of seats.
Yes,
and just all having a good time.
Yeah, look up the Venue Event Center for tickets, pre-sale tickets. Don't quote me on this, or maybe you should quote me on this, and if I'm wrong, I'm sorry about it in advance. I believe pre-sale tickets are $10. Tickets at the door are going to be $15. Yeah, we want to pack that thing up. If nothing else, then just to prove to Cadillac that live music is alive and thriving.
Mm-hmm. And for the longest time, there was not much of a space in Cadillac for live music. So we want to thank Jeremy Rose and the group over there that have made the venue such a great place for live music, for national and local acts. So we appreciate them.
Yep.
So one last thing. I'm going to go back to a quote that we talked about on the A.D.H.Deep-Dive podcast.
Okay.
So for those, and most of you probably didn't see this podcast, but
Episode 19, if you're curious. with Rich.
episode 19. So as an adult, it is extremely important to remember what you say to someone very young.
Yeah.
And at one point in David's life, one of his relatives told him, and I quote,
Oh, you got this, huh?
"You either dig ditches for a living or you tell other people to dig ditches for a living."
Pretty binary way of looking at things.
During that podcast, you said that had a profound effect on you.
Absolutely.
So think about what you're telling kids. Think about what you're saying. Think about the tone you take. Think about what you're saying, because what you say could have either a very motivating effect or a very devastating effect. One of the two. You took it the right way.
Yeah. And even if it's just as simple as, like we talked about, the phrase "you are enough" goes a long way in a person's life. And I again, to give you your own flowers, I appreciate teachers like you and Cammie and Frank for doing that for me in my own life.
I suspect as a teenager, you didn't hear that enough.
Not enough.
And I think you have spent a lifetime, or approximately 13 to 14 years out of your lifetime trying to prove everybody wrong.
That's right.
You've done it.
Well, I
so I'm very proud of you.
Thank you very much, Rich. I appreciate you.
David Mund, my co-host this morning here on 107.9 CDY. Go see that show on Wednesday night.
Again, Midwest Skies, Jesse Ray and the Carolina Catfish, Once Upon a Bison. And guys, keep Rich in business. I love this guy. He's great at what he does.
I appreciate
Send him
that,
his
bud.
flowers. Tell him he's enough.
Love you, David.
Love you, Rich.
We'll talk to you soon. Your forecast now from Morris on CDY.
Okay. There you go. That was the episode. It was a good interview. I had a great time. And again, that show itself went really, really well. We packed the place. I think it was the most well-attended local headlining show at the Venue Event Center that Cadillac has had, which sets Once Upon a Bison up which sets them up for a great opportunity to headline in the future, proving to Cadillac that live music is still alive and thriving. Okay. Just a last couple of notes here. We have a show on December 14th, Midwest Skies with Years Later, Get Better, Bring Your Best. Oh no, what is it? There's probably one more band. I'm going to look at the flyer right now. So it's Midwest Skies, Years Later, On Vacation, who just released their single, Bring Your Best and Get Better. The second annual Ugly Sweater Party at Turnstiles in Grand Rapids. Saturday, December 14th. Show starts at 8 p.m. There's a $5 cover, and there's a few drink specials there. So I'd be curious to see what you think of the drinks. Bring your ugliest sweater. There will be some sort of contest. And like I mentioned, if you're interested, go ahead and check out the Patreon. Like I said, there's no exclusive content there yet. I have every intention for there to be exclusive content. And then one more thing, just to plug one more thing. This is not a sponsor, but I feel like it might be worthwhile to pitch and maybe talk about. I use this thing called Upside, which is, if you don't have a credit card, it's basically, or even if you do have a credit card, that's fine. This is basically a cashback rewards program. You just you open up the app, you look for restaurants, convenience stores, gas stations all over. You claim your rewards, and then after you spend the money there, you get cash back. So if I go to the Marathon up the street to get gas right now is $3 a gallon. I get 15 cents per gallon cash back. If I claim it, you just tie your debit card to it, and then a day or two later, it tells you that the transaction was made, and then you get 15 cents per gallon cash back in this little account here. You can withdraw it. You can turn it into cashback rewards. I've got, as you can see, about nearly $22 on there. I use this all the time. I withdraw money from it constantly, but recently I've gotten up to about $22. You're already spending the money. And again, whether or not you have credit or bad credit or a credit card or whatever, you just want a little bit of extra cash back. This is a few pennies on the dollar that ends up adding up. I will put my referral link in the comments. If you use my link, we both get $5 as a one-time bonus, and then it's kind of like a pyramid from there. So if somebody uses your link, you get that $5 bonus. And then you also get 1 cent for every gallon that they get for life. So it's a nice little way to rack up some points, rack up some money. And then again, for every person who uses your referral link, you both get $5 into your account. So you can check out the link in the description for the Patreon. You can check out the link in the description for the Upside referral. I'll put my invite code in there. If you use my code, we both get $5. And then from there on, you get 1 cent for every gallon that somebody else uses if they use your referral code. So I'm going to try to start pushing that a little bit. Great. It'd be cool for money, but also it's a cool thing that we can do as a little team here. And then from there on, maybe I'll make a little pitch to Upside to be like, sponsor the podcast. All my tens of listeners would love to use your app. Okay, that's it. December 14th, Turnstiles, Grand Rapids, Michigan. Show starts at 8 p.m. Bunch of great bands. Ugly sweater party. I've got my ugliest sweater. There will probably not be an episode next week, but there will be an episode on the 23rd, which is the day before Christmas Eve, of course. I might do an episode the following week, but maybe that episode will just be a little bit of a holiday special to take us into Christmas and the New Year. Main thing, you will see me one more time, at least before the New Year. Thank you to Rich Spicer for having me on 107.9. Is it the Get Up and Go morning show? Is that what it's called? I forgot what the show was called. I just know that I was interviewed on 107.9 CDY with Rich Spicer. Thank you very much. I love him dearly. He was a phenomenal teacher of mine. And then thank you to everybody who came to the Cadillac show. Thank you to everybody for listening. Thank you to everybody in advance for coming to this December 14th show. This is one of our favorite shows that we do every year. So I love you. I'm going to finish this coffee. I'm going to have a little brekkie, and then we've got rehearsal in about 3 hours. So I'm going to sit and do absolutely nothing until then. All right. I love you guys, and I will see you soon.